Malcolm Ray was dressed in a tailored suit, standing in a room full of billionaires. Yet a white CEO looked him dead in the eyes and sneered. "I don't shake hands with janitors." The room laughed. Malcolm said nothing, just smiled. The next morning, that same CEO would find his entire empire on the verge of collapse. And Malcolm? He was the reason why. But no one saw the twist coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The ballroom shimmered with polished marble, golden fixtures, and chatter that sounded like millions in motion. Inside Chadjag's most elite tech gala, glasses clinked, and futures were decided in murmurs and quick nods. Laughter bubbled from corners where deals were struck and influence was quietly exchanged. The air, thick with cigar smoke and ambition, hummed with power. In the midst of it all, Malcolm Ray moved through the room, with the elegance of a man used to being invisible. His charcoal gray suit tailored to precision hugged his frame, the lapel dusted subtly with gold thread. Yet despite his sharp ensemble and the quiet confidence in his step, his dark skin and composed silence made people misread him. A white woman, in a red dress perhaps mid-30s, lightly tapped him on the arm. "Excuse me, sir, someone spilled champagne near table 6. She whispered with polite urgency. Malcolm offered a soft nod, saying nothing, and walked away, not to table 6 but toward the center of the room, where billion-dollar startups were being flaunted like new age gods. His presence was unannounced, his name untagged on the guest list. That was by design. Malcolm had long learned the value of silence, of watching from the margins. That's where truth slipped through, the careless comments, the real attitudes. And tonight, truth had already begun to expose itself. Trent Calloway stood near the champagne bar, surrounded by admirers. Slick blonde hair, white teeth too perfect, and a posture that screamed arrogance. CEO of InfiniVoice, a rising tech firm that had just secured a rumored $200 million in Series B funding. He wore his success like a weapon. Malcolm observed him for a moment, scanning the circle. A few venture capitalists he knew by face. A couple of journalists who'd once ignored his press releases. And Trent's COO, Martin Greaves, a man Malcolm had once interviewed and declined to hire. As Malcolm stepped closer, eyes followed. Some glanced with curiosity, some with that faint edge of discomfort. Only powerful black men seemed to trigger in these rooms. Trent looked up, offered his rehearsed smirk, assuming the man approaching him was about to ask for a photo or perhaps, yes, clear a glass. Before Malcolm could speak, Trent quipped loud enough for his group to hear. "I think someone dropped a napkin under that chair, my man. Mind grabbing it?" The laughter that followed wasn't from cruelty. It was the kind bred from complicity. The kind that slid easily into rooms where power was white and unchecked. Malcolm didn't flinch. His face didn't even twitch. He simply extended his hand. "I just wanted to say congratulations on your recent round." "InfiniVoice is making noise," Malcolm said. "Voice either." Trent stared at the hand. A flicker of confusion passed over his face, then amusement. His blue eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh," he said slowly, like tasting a foreign fruit. "You're not the janitor?" Malcolm said nothing. Trent chuckled, not to Malcolm, but to the circle around him. "Sorry, I don't shake hands with janitors. Hygiene reasons." The group burst into nervous laughter. Not one word in defense. Not one dissenting glance. Malcolm let the moment stretch, then dropped his hands slowly. His eyes never left Trent's. He turned and walked away. Each step deliberate. No drama, no parting shot. Just a quiet exit that echoed louder than any shouted rebuttal. As he left, one of the journalists leaned toward Trent and asked, "Who was that guy?" Trent shrugged, swirling his drink. "Somebody trying to feel important." But even as the party continued, Malcolm's absence left a vacuum. Unseen, a camera in the corner caught the entire interaction angled just enough to show Trent's sneer, Malcolm's hand, and the silence of those who stood by. Back in his hotel suite, Malcolm pulled off his jacket and sat by the window, watching the city blink. He'd expected disrespect. It was stitched into the fabric of places like these. But this moment had teeth, and it wasn't just personal. It was an opportunity. He picked up his phone and opened an encrypted app. A brief message to his assistant. "Pull InfiniVoice profile. Board meeting's still on tomorrow. Send me last quarter projections." Downstairs, at the same gala, Trent was still basking in his own laughter. But upstairs, Malcolm was preparing something far more powerful than revenge. Clarity. He was the unlisted co-chair of Obsidian Circle Capital, the secret muscle behind several of the night's most envied investments. Silent money. Silent power. And come morning, he'd be sitting across from the board that held Infinivoice's future. He had no plans for revenge. He had plans for realignment. The next morning, Malcolm is scheduled to meet the board of Trent's main investor. Detroit winters had a way of teaching a child two things early: silence and survival. Malcolm Ray grew up on the east side, where red-lined neighborhoods froze harder than the downtown skyline, and the sound of gunshots sometimes echoed louder than a school bell. His father, Horace Ray, worked the overnight shift at an auto plant, grease-stained overalls, busted knuckles, and calloused silence. His mother, Gloria, was a librarian, the kind who pressed worn books into young hands and whispered, "This can take you anywhere." The Ray household was built on discipline and dignity. They never had much, but what they did have was earned, never begged for, never borrowed. Malcolm's earliest memories were of heatless nights wrapped in blankets while his father read job ads out loud. Still, his mother's love for literature rubbed off. Malcolm learned to read before kindergarten, and by age 8 he was dissecting business magazines his mother rescued from library dumpsters. In classrooms with broken windows and underpaid teachers, Malcolm's mind moved faster than the system could catch. He asked too many questions. Too often corrected the teacher. That made him a problem. One counselor wrote that he had anger issues masked by intellect. But Malcolm knew what it really was: fear. They feared a black boy who didn't bend. By 15, he took his first job cleaning the same high school he attended. Mornings began with a mop. Nights ended with late-night bus rides home. Students mocked him. Teachers pitied him. They all called him the same name: Janitor Boy. He never corrected them. He just kept sweeping. Every paycheck went into a savings envelope. Every insult went into a mental vault, labeled motivation. He worked his way into a state college on scholarship, not charity. But the racism didn't vanish with admission. At orientation, a white parent handed him her car keys, assuming he was valet. In the business school, group projects excluded him silently. At networking events, his name tag was glanced at, then ignored. And yet, Malcolm thrived. By his junior year, he had coded an app designed to help low-income students track their financial aid and campus resources. It started as a side project. 3 months later, it had 20,000 downloads. 6 months after that, it got acquired by a fintech startup in Austin. Malcolm's cut $9 million before taxes. He didn't buy a mansion, didn't throw a party. He moved into a modest condo and spent 2 years studying venture capital by shadowing and investing quietly. What he noticed was chilling. Black founders were funded at a fraction of the rate of their white counterparts, even with better data, stronger teams, and scalable models. He began investing in what Silicon Valley dismissed. His second investment, a black-led logistics company in Atlanta, quintupled in valuation within 18 months. Then came an Afro-Caribbean food delivery startup. Then an AI-driven healthcare platform started by a Nigerian-American doctor, all successful, all ignored by mainstream capital. Slowly, quietly, Malcolm built Obsidian Circle Capital, a private equity firm so surgically discreet that many of its rival firms still believed it was led by a Swiss syndicate. He preferred it that way. Obsidian's model was simple: find genius in overlooked places, fund it, protect it, and let it grow. It became the silent oxygen behind more than 50 thriving startups by its 5th year. It also became a gatekeeper. And when Ashton Group, a Wall Street giant managing over $80 billion, sought a partner for its new diversity-focused fund, it wasn't a committee that made the call. It was Malcolm. Obsidian merged discreetly into Ashton's structure, with Malcolm becoming the quiet swing vote on major tech allocations, which brought him to Infinivoice. Trent Calloway's company had dazzled with media spin and inflated numbers, but Obsidian's audits told a more fractured story: high turnover among black staff, diversity initiatives launched then abandoned, mentorship programs promised but never funded. Trent was charisma without conscience. And now, after mocking Malcolm to his face, Trent's next round of funding sat one vote away from collapse. Obsidian is now the secret firm behind Trent's funding, and Malcolm holds the veto power. The sky over Manhattan was a bruise-colored gray, the kind of morning that felt like it held its breath. Inside a towering glass skyscraper near Bryant Park, on the 43rd floor, A boardroom buzzed with the static energy of anticipation. Suits leaned into laptops. Phones vibrated on mute. A catering tray sat untouched in the corner, next to a $900 espresso machine no one knew how to use. Trent Calloway stood at the front of the room, adjusting the cuffs on his bespoke suit. His confidence still hung around him like a tailored overcoat, but something in his posture had cracked. He kept glancing at the double doors, as if expecting someone to burst through and announce a cancellation. No one did. To the untrained eye, Trent still looked like the visionary leader they had invested in. Calm, smooth talking, and surrounded by a carefully prepared slide deck. But to those watching closely, something was off. His hands fidgeted. His smile lingered too long. His voice hitched just slightly when he greeted each board member. And then the door opened. Malcolm Ray stepped into the room. The atmosphere shifted like pressure in a sealed cabin. Every head turned. Malcolm's entrance wasn't loud. He moved with the calm of a man who'd walked through storms. But his presence was seismic. "Morning," Malcolm said evenly, offering a polite nod to each face around the table. Trent's smile froze mid-word. He blinked once, then again, the color draining from his face. It was the same man. The man he mocked. The man he called a janitor. The man whose hand he refused to shake. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce Malcolm Ray," said Lisa Hargrove, the senior managing director of Ashton Group. "Our capital partner and advisor on this round's allocations." Trent's lips parted slightly, as if he might say something. But no sound came. Malcolm took a seat at the far end of the oval table, his tablet already glowing to life with financial dashboards. He didn't look at Trent. Not directly. Not yet. Trent cleared his throat. "It's good to meet you, Malcolm," he said, voice just barely cracking. Malcolm offered a cool nod. "Likewise." The pitch began. Trent shifted into performance mode, rattling off metrics, growth rates, future projections. The screen behind him glowed with color-coded bar charts and sanitized language about scalability. His voice returned to its natural cadence, but only barely. Malcolm watched without blinking. He said nothing for the first 12 minutes. Then he raised a hand. "Can you walk me through the Q3 attrition spike?" he asked, his tone clinical. Trent paused. "Sure, that was due to a restructuring initiative. We consolidated a few roles for efficiency." "Which departments?" Malcolm asked. "Product and user experience mostly." Malcolm tapped something on his tablet. "That would explain why the beta release stalled. But your internal docs suggest the terminations were disproportionately concentrated among your Black and Latino staff. Why is that?" The question sliced through the air like broken glass. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Trent blinked. I'd have to check with HR for the specifics on that," he said, his voice tight. "You're the CEO," Malcolm replied. "You signed off on the terminations. Were the diversity impacts of that decision considered?" Trent hesitated. "We don't make staffing decisions based on race, Malcolm. That would be discriminatory." "Not if it corrects a systemic bias," Malcolm said flatly. "But continuing patterns that widen racial disparities, that's the definition of neglect." The silence that followed was heavy. The board members glanced at each other. Some tapped pens nervously. One scribbled notes like they were drafting an obituary. Malcolm leaned back, folding his hands. "One more thing," he said. "In 2021, you launched a mentorship program aimed at underserved college students. How many mentees completed the program?" Trent straightened. "I'd say about 4. Malcolm looked down at his screen. "Records show 3. And it was discontinued the following quarter." Trent's face twitched. "There were logistical issues. COVID impacted rollout. And yet somehow, you increased executive bonuses that same quarter. Interesting prioritization." The temperature in the room dropped. What began as a pitch was now an inquisition. And Malcolm never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Trent's charm was unraveling thread by thread. His voice grew defensive. His answers less crisp. The board members' body language betrayed the shift. Arms folded, glances exchanged, jaws tight. It wasn't just the numbers. It was Malcolm's poise, his control. He didn't gloat, didn't snarl. He simply revealed the truth. Cold, factual, undeniable. And with every sentence, Trent shrank. What none of them knew, what even Lisa hadn't guessed, was that Malcolm had reviewed InfiniVoice's internal records 2 weeks earlier. He'd requested a deep dive audit the moment he sensed Trent was next on the funding docket. What he found wasn't just financial instability. It was ethical rot. Trent had built a company that looked inclusive in press releases and pitch decks. But behind the curtain, it was smoke and mirrors. And Malcolm had the receipts. Trent turned to the board now, voice strained with forced optimism. Look, I admit we've made missteps. But this next round will let us correct course. We've hired a new DEI consultant. We're adding accountability layers. Lipstick on broken systems. Malcolm said under his breath. What was that? Trent asked. I said, we've heard that pitch before, Malcolm replied, meeting his eyes now for the first time. So many times, it's practically its own business model. Trent stared at him. There was no recognition of power in his face anymore, only panic. Malcolm, Lisa said gently. Do you have a recommendation? Malcolm paused. The moment was surgical. Every word would carry weight. And yet he didn't give an answer. Instead, he rose from his chair. If the board can excuse me, he said, I'd like to request a private meeting in 20 minutes. Just us. No execs. He didn't wait for agreement. He gathered his tablet and stepped out, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. Behind him, Trent stood frozen, his fate dangling in the space. Malcolm left behind. Malcolm excuses himself, but asks the board to meet him privately in 20 minutes. The room Malcolm re-entered was smaller, quieter. Gone were the sharp lines of the formal boardroom, replaced by a more intimate circular table and drawn blinds that cast soft shadows across the carpet. This space was designed not for spectacle, but for serious decision. And today, it was about to hold one that would rattle more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. 7 board members waited in stiff, cautious silence. Lisa Hargrove, Ashton Group's senior director, sat at the head of the table, her posture still proud, but her hands subtly clenched. She motioned for Malcolm to take the seat next to her. He did without hesitation, a leather folder in his hand, eyes as focused as a surgeon's. I appreciate you all making the time, Malcolm began, placing the folder in front of him. What I'm about to share concerns not just the future of InfiniVoice, but our credibility as capital partners. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. For the past 18 months, he continued, Obsidian Circle has been conducting silent audits on companies within our shared investment portfolio. We don't do it for control. We do it to measure risk, the kind that financial statements won't tell you. Cultural risk. Ethical reputational landmines. He flipped open the folder. Inside were pages of printed data, anonymous testimonies, internal emails, and hiring charts that painted a picture far uglier than any earnings report could conceal. This is InfiniVoice's DEI reporting, scrubbed and realigned with verified HR records, what they presented during the pitch today. It's an airbrushed fantasy. A hush fell. He tapped a page labeled Diversity Metrics, Internal versus External Reporting. Year 1, they recruited heavily from HBCUs, touted it in media, but failed to retain any of those hires past 6 months. Year 2, the mentorship initiative was announced, then quietly defunded. Year 3, minority leadership roles dropped to 0. Board member Edward Tang leaned in. We signed off on that report. It showed steady growth in diverse hiring. That's because the report was altered, Malcolm said calmly. The original draft from the HR team showed clear disparities and a wave of complaints from employees of color. Those pages were removed and replaced with platitudes. He passed out a second document, highlighted memos from InfiniVoice's internal HR department. These are from whistleblowers. One HR director resigned after her warnings were ignored for the 4th time. The environment was toxic, particularly in Trent's product and marketing divisions. Eileen Park, quiet until now, scanned the page. Her brow furrowed. Why didn't we know about this? Malcolm met her gaze. Some of you suspected. Some turned away. Most didn't look deep enough. Then he slid out a 3rd page, this one bearing the name Marcus Ellis. A former lead engineer, graduated top of his class from MIT. He brought InfiniVoice their largest government contract, and then he disappeared from company history. Why? Edward asked. Because Marcus reported sabotage from a senior white colleague. His work was discredited in meetings. His ideas pitched under someone else's name. When he escalated the issue, he was demoted, then iced out. Eventually he resigned. Lisa sat back, stunned. I never saw his name on exit logs. You wouldn't, Malcolm said. His departure was documented as voluntary disengagement. But before he left, he filed a formal complaint and a lawsuit. Gasps circled the table. I personally funded Marcus's legal team, Malcolm said, his voice steady. Anonymously, I wanted to see if he had a case. He leaned forward, tone now sharp as glass. He did, and so do 6 others. All black or Latino, all hired, exploited, in a Lisa stared at the papers as if they might change if she blinked long enough. And Trent? Knew everything. Signed off on everything. Directed most of it. A long silence passed. Edward cleared his throat. We thought he was difficult, not dangerous. There's a difference between arrogance and corruption, Malcolm replied. He crossed that line 2 years ago. He closed the folder and folded his hands. I'm not just here to condemn him, Malcolm said. I'm here to offer an alternative. Eyes lifted from documents, all locking on him. I've already secured soft commits from 2 major funds, plus Obsidian's internal capital. If the board removes Trent immediately, Obsidian will fully replace the $4 billion Series C funding round, with better terms, no dilution, and increased return thresholds. Dead silence. You'd personally cover the full round? Lisa asked, blinking. Yes, Malcolm said. And more if needed. But the condition is non-negotiable. Trent steps down. The room trembled with shifting power. What once felt like an uphill accusation now felt like an execution. Eileen whispered, Do we have legal grounds to remove him? Lisa responded quietly, If we have this data, and the proof of manipulation, we don't just have grounds, we have responsibility. Malcolm nodded. Look, I know this is unprecedented, but that's exactly why it matters. This industry preaches innovation, yet fears confrontation. We let men like Trent flourish because they know how to talk the talk. Meanwhile, the people under them suffer silently, professionally suffocated in well-lit offices with free coffee and invisible chains. One board member rubbed his face. This will cause media fallout. No, Malcolm replied. This will create precedent. Finally, they fell into silent consideration. Just outside the door, however, someone else was listening. Trent Calloway leaned against the wall, his ear pressed near the seam of the door. His face was pale, the blood drained out. What started as a harmless eavesdrop had turned into a professional death sentence, heard in real time. He couldn't believe it. The janitor, the man he humiliated just 24 hours ago, he was one signature away from erasing him. Trent's breathing grew shallow. Rage boiled behind his eyes. He felt his phone vibrate. A message from his COO. How did it go? He didn't answer. Instead, he opened a hidden encrypted chat and typed, Initiate it. Full release. Everything we've got on Ray. Kill his image. A response came instantly. Are you sure? This could backfire. Do it now. Back inside the room, Lisa finally looked up. I think we should vote. Malcolm stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I'll step out while you do. He left the room with calm purpose, unaware that across the city, newsrooms were about to receive anonymous tips, doctored documents, and an old mugshot Malcolm hadn't seen in over a decade. Trent eavesdrops outside the door and prepares a dirty counterattack. The digital storm began quietly. No thunder, no warnings. Just a whisper in the dark. At 2:17 a.m., a Twitter thread appeared from an account with no photo, 0 followers, and a name like a glitch, Arias at Warren. The post was direct, sinister, and soaked in insinuation. It accused Malcolm Ray of tax fraud, offshore shell accounts, and sexual misconduct involving multiple unnamed sources. There were bullet points, allegedly leaked documents, and a screenshot of a spreadsheet with his name tied to fraudulent wire transfers. By 2:42 a.m., the thread had 12,000 retweets. By 3:11, 6 anonymous blogs picked up the story. Each one had its own slant, some more aggressive, some suggesting investigation is underway, others outright labeling Malcolm as a con artist. They wove the narrative like a net. One headline screamed, "The billion-dollar blackface, is Malcolm Ray just a puppet?" But the photo was what broke the dam. At 3:53 a.m., an image emerged, a mugshot, time-stamped 205. Malcolm Ray, age 19, his eyes red-rimmed, a bruise under one, a single tear at the edge of his cheek. By dawn it had spread to every major platform. TikTok videos dissected his real past. Twitter spaces buzzed with conspiracy theories. Reddit threads asked if Obsidian Circle was ever real. Instagram pages framed the image with captions like, "From janitor to jail, to CEO." A trending hashtag appeared before 6 a.m., Malcolm Ray exposed. The timing wasn't accidental. The goal wasn't just damage, it was to discredit, erase, dismantle. Malcolm woke to his phone, vibrating off the bedside table. He blinked against the light, his fingers instinctively reaching. 46 missed calls. His assistant Clara, his attorney, a board member, a CNN producer. He didn't answer any. Clara was already pacing his kitchen when he entered, barefoot and silent. She turned, phone still pressed to her cheek, her other hand holding a tablet. I know, she said, into the call. We're drafting a statement, but nothing goes out until we get confirmation on the source. No, he's not speaking yet. He's handling it. Malcolm stood motionless at the island counter. The tablet was glowing. He saw it, his face frozen in digital infamy. The mugshot. His shame. Turned weapon. Clara ended the call and placed the tablet down gently, as if trying not to spook a wounded animal. Malcolm, she began. They're calling you everything from a fraud to a frontman. Obsidian's email servers are under DDoS. 3 of our minor LPs are pulling inquiries. Malcolm's voice was almost a whisper. That photo was sealed. Clara nodded. Which means someone broke in, either legally or bought it. He sank onto a stool, rubbing his temples. They dug deep, he murmured. This isn't just dirt, it's engineered. Clara sat opposite him. They timed it. Right before the press would cover the board vote. Right after you made your play. Malcolm looked up, eyes sharp now. Trent. She didn't have to confirm it. Instead, she slid her laptop forward. We're tracing metadata. 6 of the blogs run on the same DNS cluster. Registered 72 hours ago. The Twitter account was created 3 days ago. IP pings from an agency in DC. Linden Strategies? Malcolm asked. She nodded. Yes. They specialize in dark PR, crisis suppression, smear launches, reputation cleansing. He stared at her. Who hired them? She turned the screen. Infinavoice's name appeared, buried beneath shell LLCs, but unmistakable. He struck first, Malcolm whispered. A knock on the door interrupted them. It was Isaac, Obsidian's digital security lead. He entered, holding a USB drive. I cross-referenced the metadata, he said. We have a full chain. It all leads back to a side account funded by Infinavoice's marketing budget. Trent didn't just sign off. He fast-tracked this before yesterday's board vote. Malcolm took the USB, fingers curling around it like a trigger. He knew he couldn't survive a clean vote. Isaac added. So he decided to make you radioactive. The silence that followed was heavy, not of defeat, but something else coiled tension, waiting to strike. Malcolm stood. Call a press conference. Clara blinked. You want to respond? No, he said. I want to reset the narrative, not defend, reclaim. Isaac frowned. They'll double down. He's betting you'll lash out. I won't, Malcolm said. I'll speak, but on my terms. That afternoon, the Obsidian team transformed a civic hall in Lower Manhattan into a press venue. Rows of chairs, plexiglass podium, 3 flags behind it, American, State of New York, and the Obsidian Circle crest. Security was doubled. Metal detectors at the entrance. Plainclothes officers. They expected disruption. By the time the press arrived, Malcolm's name was the top trending topic worldwide. Outside, protesters gathered. Some held signs that read, Truth or Trickster. Others held old magazine covers with Malcolm's face on them, now defaced with red X's. Inside, cameras zoomed. Microphones extended. Every major network was present, even the BBC. Malcolm stood backstage, flanked by Clara and Isaac. He adjusted his cuffs, took a deep breath. Then he saw it on every live monitor. His mugshot, blown up, behind every anchor, projected as the key visual. It hovered like a ghost above his podium. Isaac clenched his jaw. They're framing you before you speak. Clara touched his arm. You still want to go out there? Malcolm nodded, especially now. He walked slowly toward the stage, every step deliberate. Reporters leaned forward. Flashes ignited. Cameras followed every blink. Malcolm stepped up to the podium. He glanced once at the screen behind him. The face of his past, weaponized against his present. He looked back down, flicked open a folder, and said, clearly and calmly, let's talk about what truth really looks like. Before he speaks, the mugshot is blown up on every news channel backdrop. For 3 full seconds, Malcolm Ray said nothing. The silence at the podium wasn't empty. It was electric. Behind him, his mugshot loomed, blown up on monitors across the country. That single tear, frozen in time, now weaponized. Around him, cameras flashed like lightning in a storm. Reporters leaned in. The world waited. Then Malcolm leaned into the microphone.
My name is Malcolm Ray.
And yes, that photo is real. Gasps fluttered through the room. But his voice didn't tremble. I was 19. A sophomore at Kensington State. On scholarship. Living in dorm 4B. That night, campus security did a random sweep. But it wasn't random. They checked 3 dorms. All of them housed black students. Not a single white dorm was searched. He paused. I had just come back from the library. I didn't have my ID on me. I told them I lived there. They didn't care. I was handcuffed, charged with trespassing, in my own dorm. The silence deepened. Several reporters lowered their pens. They dropped the charges a week later. He continued, but not before I was fingerprinted, processed, and cataloged, like a threat. Not before that image became a part of my digital footprint. That's what you're looking at. Not a criminal. A student caught in a system built to make him disappear. He turned to the screen and pointed to the mugshot. They used this because it makes you hesitate. It makes you wonder if I'm trustworthy. It doesn't matter that I built companies, funded over 60 startups, employed over 3,000 people. No, they wanted you to see this, so you'd question all of it. He reached into the folder on the podium and pulled out a series of documents. These are ownership deeds, not leases, not partnerships. These are the properties owned by Obsidian Circle Capital. Our headquarters, our incubators, our equity labs. Click the screen behind him changed. Photos and scanned deeds filled the monitor. These are financial records. Clean audits. Every quarter. Every year. Click. These are testimonials. From employees, founders, partners. People who've built something because someone like me believed in them when no one else would. One slide quoted Alicia S., Director of Strategy. Malcolm didn't just hire me. He gave me the platform to lead. Another from Ron J., a health tech founder. When I walked into every VC's office, they saw my skin. Malcolm saw my strategy. I've been called cleaning boy while signing lease renewals on buildings I owned. I've been mistaken for the janitor, the assistant, the caterer, even while holding majority shares in the companies I was meeting with. I've been erased in real time, my presence rewritten, my power downplayed. He exhaled slowly, then looked across the sea of faces. I kept quiet for years. I believed dignity meant silence. That walking away was strength. That swallowing racism was noble. A beat. But silence doesn't protect us. It only preserves the system. The room stilled. Some reporters had stopped taking notes altogether. I didn't build Obsidian to get revenge. I built it to rewrite the rules. Because people like me weren't supposed to be in the room, let alone own it. Click. A new image appeared. A black child sitting on a stoop in Detroit, surrounded by library books. That's me. Age 10. My mother was a librarian. My father worked night shifts at a factory. We didn't have much, but we had stories. I read every business magazine I could find. I believed a lie that merit would be enough. He stepped from behind the podium, walking to the front of the stage. Merit is a myth, when the gatekeepers control the locks. So I became the locksmith. The room broke into murmurs of awe.
And now?
Now they want to erase me, frame me, reduce me, because I challenged comfort, because I demanded accountability. He pointed again to the mugshot. This doesn't shame me anymore. This empowers me. It reminds me who I fight for. A single voice clapped in the back. Then, another. Then the room erupted. Reporters, spectators. Even some camera crew stood. Applause rolled through the space like thunder. Online, Twitter exploded. My stand with Malcolm trended globally within minutes. CNN swapped the mugshot for a live image of Malcolm at the podium. MSNBC ran the headline, from profiled to powerhouse. On Reddit, users launched threads detailing Malcolm's investments in marginalized founders. LinkedIn overflowed with posts about workplace bias. On TikTok, clips from the speech went viral, captioned with, "This is what leadership looks like." Meanwhile, a new trend emerged. Handshake horror. CEO of disrespect. Trent Calloway exposed. Trent's smug image from the gala began circulating next to quotes from the speech. Within hours, Infamy Voices board issued a statement announcing a comprehensive internal review. Media outlets began requesting interviews with former black employees. Malcolm had not just defended himself. He had ignited a reckoning. But not everyone was celebrating. Back at Obsidian headquarters, Clara met Malcolm in the lobby with a tight expression. "They want to see you," she said. "All of them." Malcolm entered the boardroom. The partners were seated, every face stone still. Lisa Hargrove stood first. "Malcolm," she began, "thank you for coming. We appreciate your clarity earlier today." He raised an eyebrow. "But," Edward cleared his throat, "some of our institutional partners have expressed concern." "About what?" Lisa exchanged glances with the others. "About visibility. About the firm's future brand identity. You've become the face." Malcolm folded his arms. "I built this face from nothing. I earned that stage." "We know," Edward said. "But funders fear volatility, public battles, political overtones." Another partner added, "They don't invest in personalities. They invest in control." Malcolm shook his head. "So what are you asking me?" Lisa paused. "To step back, temporarily. Let Clara or someone else handle press. Let us reframe the firm." "Reframe the firm? Reframe him?" Malcolm looked around the room at the men and women who'd profited off his instincts, used his identity when it was convenient, and now flinched when it cast too long a shadow. He gave no answer. Just silence. A silence that roared. And the word that stung the most, activist. That's what they feared Obsidian was becoming. Not visionary, not principled, activist. Malcolm walked down the hallway without speaking, his reflection trailing him in the glass. That word had always been coded, a polite term used to warn black professionals when they'd gotten too loud, too bold, too visible. He reached his office, closed the door quietly, and exhaled. They wanted him to retreat, to shrink, to become the ghost CEO again, the silent partner with the golden brain. But a muted voice, the symbol without the speech. But he was done with silence. The next morning, Malcolm posted a public letter across every major social platform, simply titled, "Enough." In it he laid out a pledge, $500 million in direct, no-equity funding to underrepresented founders, women, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, LGBTQ+. The funding would bypass traditional venture structures, offering grants, mentorship, and infrastructure. It would be visible. It would be unapologetic. He signed it. "We don't just build wealth, we build access." Malcolm Ray, founder Obsidian Circle Capital. The post went viral in minutes. Praise flooded in from tech leaders, activists, and young founders long locked out of capital. Hashtags surged. Video clips of Malcolm's speech from the press conference were remixed with his letter. It was dubbed the Ray Renaissance. But inside Obsidian, the mood fractured. Emails poured in from partners, some cautiously supportive, others openly alarmed. "Malcolm, we should have discussed this first. This could alienate our global partners. Legacy firms don't operate this way." Clara forwarded him a string of messages from European investors who were reevaluating commitments. Others questioned whether Obsidian had pivoted toward political ideology. One message, unsigned, simply read, "He's too loud. They're going to shut us down." At the next partner meeting, the room was colder. Lisa opened the discussion. "We understand your passion, Malcolm, but unilateral announcements without board approval violate protocol." Edward nodded. "And we can't pretend there won't be consequences. We're already seeing withdrawal threats." Malcolm stood at the head of the table, his hands calm but unshaking. "I didn't consult you," he said, "because I knew you'd say no." Several brows rose. Lisa blinked. "Excuse me? You didn't say no when we funded 9 back-to-back crypto startups run by the same 3 Stanford dropouts. You didn't say no when we lost $40 million chasing hype. But I knew you'd hesitate when it came to real change. Because this isn't about risk. It's about discomfort." Silence. "I'm not asking for permission," Malcolm continued. "I'm giving you an option. If you're not aligned with the mission, sell me your shares. I'll buy out any partner who doesn't want to be part of this. At a premium." You could feel the room inhale. Lisa stiffened. "You're threatening a hostile buyout?" "No," Malcolm said. "I'm offering an ethical exit." Edward leaned forward. "That's not how partnership works. It is when the partnership forgets its purpose," Malcolm said. Obsidian wasn't built to mimic white capital. It was built to challenge it. The meeting ended without consensus. Over the next week, 3 partners quietly accepted his offer. Malcolm signed 6-figure checks personally, Clara ensured transitions were seamless. The press never caught wind. To the outside world, Obsidian was humming. But inside, the temperature was changing. Malcolm wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was becoming a symbol, and symbols scare institutions. Then came the twist. On a Tuesday morning, as Malcolm sipped coffee at his desk, Clara burst in with her phone. "You need to see this." She turned the screen toward him. Trent Calloway, standing on a red carpet, flashing that same overconfident smile, shaking hands with Roland Creech, the white billionaire behind Goldwater Tech, infamous for funding alt-right platforms and denying systemic racism in public interviews. The headline read, "InfiniVoice secures strategic partnership with Creech Capital Group. $2.2 billion. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "This man once said diversity makes companies weak," Clara whispered. "He called it forced socialism in business." The message was loud. Trent wasn't trying to recover his company. He was declaring war. Trent announces a major partnership with an old racist billionaire to save his company. Malcolm stared at the glowing headline on Clara's phone, his jaw tightening. InfiniVoice secures strategic partnership with Creech Capital Group. $2.2 billion. He didn't need to read the fine print. He already knew who Roland Creech was, CEO of Goldwater Tech, a man whose business empire had grown fat on federal surveillance contracts and AI-powered predictive policing. A man whose name was whispered at diversity summits like a ghost story told to warn others of what unchecked power could breed. Creech wasn't just controversial, he was caustic. 4 racial discrimination lawsuits in as many years. A public-facing board with 0 non-white members. A workplace culture described by former staffers as plantation-era politeness, where smiling black employees were plastered across brochures while being paid 30% less than their white peers. But the real smoking gun had come a year earlier. A leaked audio recording. Malcolm remembered the words because they seared into memory like acid. "Diversity makes companies weak. You can't run an empire on pity hires." Creech had denied it was him, claimed it was AI-generated slander. But no voice analysis could save him from the internal exodus that followed. Executives resigned. Engineers walked. Goldwater stock briefly nosedived before a quiet recovery. And now here he was, resurrected, grinning beside Trent Calloway. Malcolm's phone buzzed. It was Clara again. "I did a background scrape," she said. "Goldwater's been moving money through shell funds into InfiniVoice for months. This wasn't sudden. They've been planning this since the board turned on Trent." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He played the long game. "It gets worse," she continued. "Creech just announced a new venture fund. $600 million. They're calling it a tech patriotism initiative. No DEI, no social impact metrics. All meritocratic language. All dog whistles." It wasn't just a partnership. It was a platform. Malcolm acted quickly. He called his private network a web of journalists, whistleblower attorneys and tech watchdogs, cultivated over years. One by one he laid out the plan. "If we go public, we go all the way," he told a reporter at the Axis Ledger. "No soft peddling. No centering whiteness." Then came the call that changed everything. "Malcolm?" said the voice, cautious. It was Jalen Thompson, a former Goldwater data engineer. Quiet, brilliant, and driven out of the company under fabricated accusations of misuse of admin credentials. "I've got something," Jalen said. "Been sitting on it for 2 years." They met in a quiet cafe off Lexington. Jalen wore a hoodie pulled low, eyes darting at every movement. He handed Malcolm a drive. "They thought I deleted everything, but I backed it all up. Every racist email, every hiring report, Creech's internal memos, stuff you won't believe." Malcolm accepted the drive without a word. Back at Obsidian HQ, Isaac and Clara began scanning the files. What they found wasn't just damning, it was grotesque. Emails between executives mocking black applicants' names. Internal policy drafts that labeled HBCUs as non-preferred talent pipelines. An executive memo from Creech himself. "Don't over-index on minority hires. Optics are fine, but never let quotas compromise core IQ." Screenshots. PDFs. Voicemails. And most chilling, a detailed report sent directly to Creech about a black female software engineer who'd filed a harassment claim. His handwritten note scrawled at the bottom. "Tell her she's too emotional, and offer a severance. She'll take it." They had enough to scorch reputations. Malcolm took the data and encrypted it, then passed it, anonymously through a protected whistleblower leak portal to the Axis Ledger and The Guardian. 3 days later, The story broke. Inside Goldwater Tech, racism, retaliation, and the cost of silence. The expose ripped through the tech world like wildfire. Screenshots plastered across every news outlet. Think pieces exploded. Sponsors began backing out of Goldwater's upcoming AI conference. Political pundits demanded federal probes. An investor pulled $600 million from their index fund, citing ethical concerns. Creech tried to deny everything, called it a deep-fake conspiracy. But digital forensics confirmed the metadata. The emails were real. The recordings, authentic. And the cultural rot, undeniable. Malcolm didn't publicly claim credit. But the industry knew. Everyone knew. And Trent? His grinning photo with Creech resurfaced in the worst possible way. Meme pages lit up. One viral image captioned, "When your lifeboat turns out to be a burning cross." But even as the fires raged around them, Malcolm received a quiet envelope hand-delivered to Obsidian's front desk by a federal courier. He opened it slowly. Inside was a subpoena. The Department of Justice. Re-interference with protected corporate entities and violation of confidentiality agreements. His hands stiffened. Clara entered moments later, saw the letter, and froze. "They're not investigating Trent or Creech," Malcolm said quietly. "They're investigating me." Just as the story drops, Malcolm gets a subpoena from the DOJ. Malcolm sat at the head of his conference table. The DOJ subpoena spread in front of him like a slap across the face. The language was cold, bureaucratic, and unmistakably targeted. Subject: Malcolm D. Ray. Alleged interference with a federally protected corporate entity under Title 18, Section 1951 of the U.S. Code. The phrase protected corporate entity was a euphemism, and everyone in the room knew it. It didn't mean integrity. It meant influence. It meant someone, somewhere had pulled strings. Goldwater donated to 9 PACs last year. Isaac muttered, scanning his laptop. 4 of them directly support the Energy and Commerce Committee. 2 fund members on the Senate Ethics Oversight Board. Legal laundering, Clara added. They gave the money, and now the DOJ's giving them a favor. Malcolm didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "They're not just trying to criminalize my resistance," he said quietly. "They're trying to punish visibility." 3 days later, he received a formal congressional summons. Subcommittee on Investment Ethics and National Capital Stability. Topic: Influence, Interference, and Identity in American Finance. Malcolm read the title twice. Identity. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The hearing was scheduled in D.C., inside a high-ceilinged committee chamber where the American flag draped like judgment over the proceedings. It was televised, of course, and reporters filled the back rows with pens sharpened like knives. Malcolm entered the chamber flanked by his legal team, wearing a charcoal suit with a muted pin on his lapel, a small silver broom, a quiet nod to the insult that had started it all. The chair of the committee, a senator from Wyoming, with a donor list matching Goldwater's, began the hearing with practiced neutrality. "We are here today to examine the growing influence of private capital in public discourse, and whether individuals in power are using media, finance, or activism to destabilize regulated markets." No one needed to name Malcolm. The whole room knew. They had already framed him in headlines as the black billionaire who went too far. Malcolm took his seat at the witness table, placed a folder in front of him, and waited. The questions began polite, almost disarmingly so. "Mr. Ray, can you explain your decision to leak internal communications about a federal contractor to the press?" "I didn't leak anything," Malcolm said clearly. "A whistleblower did. I verified the authenticity of the documents, but I did not distribute them. Whistleblowing is protected under federal law." The senators shifted. Another asked, "Do you believe your actions have created unnecessary instability in a market that supports thousands of American jobs?" Malcolm leaned forward slightly. "I believe truth creates discomfort, not instability. Goldwater Tech created its own instability when it chose racism over reason." Murmurs rippled behind him. The senator raised an eyebrow. "And you think it's your role to determine corporate morality?" Malcolm smiled faintly. "I think it's everyone's role, but most people stay quiet. I just didn't." A third senator, more aggressive, cut in. "Obsidian Circle has grown rapidly, faster than most private equity firms. Some say your success is rooted in identity politics, not strategy." Malcolm opened his folder. "These are our investment returns over the past 7 years, outperforming market benchmarks by 11%. No taxpayer subsidies, no federal contracts, just returns driven by overlooked talent. He pushed the documents across the table. These are the people we invested in. Founders who had been rejected 40, 50 times. Not because they weren't qualified, but because their names didn't sound right. Because they didn't come from Stanford or MIT. Because they were too brown, too female, too gay, too real. He pulled out a second sheet. These are emails I received last week. Death threats. Slurs. One called me a monkey in a suit. I brought them so you'd understand what being visible in this body, in this skin, in this power, really costs. The room fell into silence. Malcolm continued, voice unwavering. We're not just fighting for capital, we're fighting for the right to build, to lead, to exist in spaces that were never designed for us. He looked directly at the Wyoming senator. And if that makes me dangerous, then maybe the system is what needs regulating. The committee chair said nothing, but the cameras had caught every syllable. Within hours, the hearing trended globally. Clips flooded YouTube. TikTok turned his testimony into anthem-like montages. The right to build became a slogan. Protesters gathered outside the Capitol steps, holding signs that read, "Being black isn't interference. Let us lead. Truth is not treason." Malcolm left the chamber with his head held high. But as he walked down the marble hallway, a voice called after him. "Mr. Ray." He turned. It was Senator Eleanor Blake, the quiet centrist from Illinois. She extended a manila folder toward him, her expression unreadable. "This came across my desk. You didn't get it from me." He accepted it wordlessly. The folder was unmarked, except for one word stamped on top. Confidential. After the hearing, a senator slips Malcolm a file marked confidential. Malcolm closed the door to his office and drew the shades. The manila folder sat on his desk like a loaded weapon. The word confidential wasn't just a label. It was a warning. He opened it slowly. Inside were scanned memos, financial spreadsheets, email threads, and stamped clearance records. Each document more damning than the last. It was a roadmap of corruption, threading together Trent Calloway, Roland Creech, and several high-ranking officials within federal procurement agencies. Over $300 million in no-bid government contracts funneled to Goldwater Tech through manipulated diversity waivers. The justification, a shell nonprofit fronting as a black-owned tech incubator. One email from Trent to Creech read, "We greenlight the dummy program. You lock down the contract. I'll spin the optics. We both win. Nobody checks past the press release." Another memo detailed a $2.5 million wire transfer to a private political consulting firm, known for laundering consulting payments into campaign coffers. But what truly turned Malcolm's stomach were the buried reports, formal HR investigations from Infinivoice and Goldwater Tech, all filed, acknowledged, and then quietly marked, no further action. Sexual harassment complaints, racial slurs in group chats, a black employee fired after speaking to the press. All ignored. All silenced. There it was in print. Everything Malcolm had suspected. He could destroy them. But as he stared at the pile of evidence, a second truth gnawed at him. Doing so would crash systems bigger than just Trent or Creech. Goldwater held defense contracts. Infinivoice powered digital communications in 2 federal agencies. Pulling this trigger would be an earthquake, rippling through tech markets, government partnerships, pensions, and most painfully, innocent jobs. Thousands of employees who knew nothing of this. Malcolm sat with that weight for hours. He called in a small war council, Clara, Isaac, Obsidian's legal lead, and 3 outside experts, a civil rights attorney, an economic strategist, and a former federal prosecutor. "What happens if this goes public?" he asked. The civil rights lawyer, Ava Mensa, flipped through the file. Mass resignations, corporate lawsuits, 2, maybe 3 federal probes. It could collapse parts of Creech's empire overnight. "And the collateral?" Malcolm asked. The economist sighed. Goldwater supports thousands of blue-collar workers, veterans, government vendors. Some of them would be crushed in the fallout. Isaac spoke next. "But letting it slide? That's permission. Creech and Trent keep rebuilding, just smarter. And next time they bury it better." Malcolm looked at Ava. "How do we take out the rot without killing the tree?" She thought a moment. "You don't blow the foundation. You break the spine." That night, they devised a plan, surgical, discreet, and devastatingly effective. Malcolm began quietly coordinating with a select unit inside the DOJ, those who hadn't been tainted by Goldwater's reach. He passed the file anonymously through 3 vetted intermediaries. A 4th layer encryption. Time-delayed downloads. No metadata trails. He left nothing to chance. He also leaked key fragments to the Axis ledger, ensuring the public would get the truth, even if federal inertia stalled justice. But he was careful. No whistleblower names. No employee data. Nothing that could bring collateral damage. They would target the decision-makers, not the workforce. 10 days later, Clara received a secure call. The FBI was scheduling a coordinated raid on Goldwater Tech headquarters and 2 private residences linked to Creech and Trent. "They're calling it Operation White Paper," she said, almost in disbelief. "They're moving. For real." Malcolm nodded. "Schedule a flight to DC. I want to be out of town when it happens. We need to stay ahead." They were cautious. They were smart. But the next morning, just before dawn, Malcolm woke to the sound of shattering glass. It wasn't a raid. It was a ransacking. The FBI schedules a raid, but the next morning, Malcolm's home is ransacked first. The fall of Roland Creech sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. Goldwater Tech's stock plummeted within hours of his arrest. Contracts were canceled. Investors pulled out. Within 3 days, journalists unearthed a damning web of scandals. Offshore accounts tied to foreign intelligence, diversity funds rerouted to shell companies, and at least 6 civil rights lawsuits forcibly settled under NDA. Media headlines read like tombstones. The empire built on erasure. Goldwater's whitewash exposed, from billionaire to booking number. But for Malcolm, the battle wasn't over. Trent Calloway remained, still the one sitting in the smoking ruin. Trent, desperate to escape the flames, began quietly shopping InfiniVoice to international buyers. But no one wanted it. Not with his tarnished name, the leaked December memos, referencing racial bias, and viral clips of his "I don't shake hands with janitors" moment. Malcolm watched the collapse with cold precision. Obsidian Circle Capital already held a 39% equity stake in InfiniVoice from prior investment. During the DOJ probes, 2 smaller shareholders defaulted on collateral, triggering Obsidian's rights to an extra 10%, bringing Malcolm's control to a staggering 4%. Clara studied the updated ledger. "You're 1% away from majority control." Malcolm didn't flinch. That's still enough to make the call. He called a board meeting. Inside the sleek conference room, former board heavyweights now sat stunned and subdued. Malcolm stood at the head, calm like a storm front gathering. His proposal was uncompromising. Dissolve InfiniVoice. Entirely. Liquidate their legacy assets. Redeploy the hardware and code to form Circle Catalyst, a social enterprise delivering encrypted tech to underserved communities, NGOs, and global activists. Board members inhaled sharply. "This is a $3 billion company," one stammered. "You're burning it for a non-profit." "No," Malcolm replied gently. "I'm transforming it into truth." He paused. "And I'll match your current share values. Double your ROI. Wire the difference personally." The room froze. One by one, hands raised, and votes cast. The decision was unanimous. InfiniVoice died. Within weeks, Circle Catalyst launched, hailed across industry blogs as the phoenix of purpose. Youth empowerment groups partnered. Civil rights organizations declared it a capitalist correction. Former employees celebrated. Malcolm watched quietly, working late nights not just restoring code or structure, but restoring dignity. Then came the letter, hand-delivered, embossed. Harvard University. They proposed naming the new School of Innovation and Ethics after Malcolm Ray. A full endowment, global recognition, permanent legacy in a place that had once overlooked boys from redline Detroit neighborhoods. But there was a warning. "There's backlash," Clara said softly, voice constricted. "Donors, alumni, even some faculty say you're too political." Malcolm held the letter lightly. He closed his eyes, recalling nights spent cleaning school floors, earning scholarships, building dreams. The same institution that once ignored applicants like him now wanted his name on a school. But at what cost? Malcolm receives a letter. Harvard wants to name a school after him. But there's backlash. Malcolm was asleep when his world shattered. At 4:37 a.m., a violent crash echoed up the stairs of his Manhattan brownstone. The private security team sprinted toward his office. The sound of glass shattering and memories being torn apart had interrupted everything. They found the room utterly transformed. Desks overturned. Closets emptied. Cabinets pried open. 3 laptops gone, 2 safety deposit-style safes forced open, hacked with forensic precision. But it wasn't just theft. This was cleansing. Family photos were slashed, a child's graduation yearbook ripped in half, his father's blueprint sketches defaced, precious childhood keepsakes, a toy bus from Detroit, his mother's worn writing journal, destroyed, a bronze chess piece, engraved with first in college, shattered. Malcolm walked in behind the security team, steady and silent. His eyes absorbed the wreckage. No screams, no outburst, just the weight of violation. "This isn't a robbery," Clara said softly, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "This is an execution." The NYPD arrived, then a DOJ liaison, Operation White Paper, now on high alert. Isaac, Obsidian's head of digital forensics, scrolled through burned fragments of surveillance logs. He looked up. Cameras were disabled from the inside. Someone used the override. Not a hack. They had access. Isaac's screen showed logs accessed from an internal profile at 4:02 a.m., 5 minutes before the crash. "Check external sensors," Malcolm instructed. An hour later, Isaac returned with grainy alley footage from an unmanaged backup sensor. The silhouette entering the gate matched a known face: Darius Wynn, former Obsidian vice president, protege, family to Malcolm. Darius, who left 6 months ago for rest and was later hired by Trent, now captured on camera, entering Malcolm's property at night. Malcolm's breath tightened, not in rage but heartbreak. He didn't scream. He nodded quietly and leaned in. The betrayal stung deeper than any tearful indictment. Standing in the ruined office, Malcolm wrapped his hand around a shard of broken glass until it cut him. "They didn't come for files," he whispered. "They came for identity, for erasure." Rather than retreat, he pivoted to action. At 3:00 p.m., he stood behind a press podium at Brooklyn's Restoration Plaza. Projected behind him, aerial photos of the ruined room. Bold text: "They tried to erase me. I didn't lose data," he began. "I lost icons of my life, evidence of where I come from and who I am." He pulled out his father's blueprints, scanned copies, showed damaged floor safes, then revealed decrypted backups stored aboard remote servers. They slashed photos and journals because stories can't be digitized but legacies can't be erased. "I kept them safe." A photograph of his mother's final handwritten letter to him was held aloft beside a black and white image of him aged 10, reading in a Detroit library. He continued, "You cannot delete dignity. You cannot redact memories." The speech went viral. 8 million views. In under 24 hours. Social platforms exploded. Black entrepreneurs held photos of their own workspaces, with the caption, "Built from what they tried to burn." Hashtag movements like, "Notarizable united thousands." Then came the legal retaliation. Obsidian filed charges, civil and criminal suits against Darius Wynn. Isaac provided logs, screenshots, and access records. Clara compiled testimonials from Obsidian staff, confirming Darius's access to sensitive vaults and systems until his resignation. Malcolm's public statement was short but potent. "Betrayal from your own is still betrayal, and I won't just survive it, I'll catalog it." Support letters rolled in. Former Obsidian interns posted tearful testimonials. Tech leaders tweeted solidarity. A coalition of Black founders launched the Ray Resilience Fund, raising $3. Then came the shock. Clara burst into Malcolm's office as he reviewed fundraising pitches. "It happened," she said, voice tight. She turned on a live news feed from Capitol Hill. The ticker blazed. Breaking. Goldwater Tech CEO Roland Creech, arrested this morning. Charges include conspiracy, falsified diversity filings, and obstructing a federal investigation. Creech was handcuffed, escorted into an unmarked van. Cameras trailed as he stared blankly ahead. Malcolm stared at the screen. The corporate colossus had toppled. Yet the betrayal within his house still cut sharper. He turned to Clara. "They think this wins the war." She nodded. "But that snake is still in the grass," Malcolm said. The next day, Malcolm gets a call. Creech has been arrested, but at what cost? Malcolm receives a letter. Harvard wants to name a school after him, but there's backlash. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Malcolm Ray held it in one hand, turning it over as though waiting for the weight to shift. Embossed in crimson and gold, the seal of Harvard University stared back at him, unblinking. Expect. Inside, the offer was breathtaking. a proposal to rename their new School of Innovation and Ethics after him. The Malcolm Ray School of Equity and Enterprise. A full endowment, a cornerstone legacy, his name engraved into the institution that had once rejected him without ever reading his application. But there was a second document enclosed, one less gilded, more sobering. Clara read the final paragraph aloud. While the vote was strongly favorable, a contingent of alumni, donors and faculty expressed concern about Mr. Ray's political visibility and past activism. Several have threatened to withdraw funding. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. So, I'm both a legacy and a liability. Clara didn't respond. She didn't have to. Social media caught fire within hours of the leak. Praise from young black scholars. Condemnation from conservative think tanks. Headlines battled across the spectrum. Harvard gets it right. Ray to lead ethical revolution. Too political for prestige. Malcolm Ray sparks donor exodus. A builder or a bulldozer. Anonymous alumni letters leaked online. He made his wealth by dividing people. What kind of message are we sending our children? Symbolism doesn't equal scholarship. Malcolm read each one quietly, not with rage, but fatigue. I never asked for this, he said, watching the sun fall across his desk. I didn't build companies so I could be carved in stone. You didn't, Clara said. But you built something that made them look up. He walked to the window, staring over the city that once saw him only as a broom in motion. His thoughts returned to that gala night, to Trent's voice, the laughter, the hollowing silence after his handshake was refused. He'd worn a suit that night, not designer, just dignified. But they didn't see it. All they saw was skin and service. I didn't come for fame. I came for fairness. The next morning, Clara burst into his study, tablet in hand. You need to see this. On screen, a video was playing. Hundreds of students marching through Harvard Yard. They carried brooms in the air like torches, ribbons tied to each handle. Others wore shirts with bold white letters. They called me a janitor. I became a builder. A young black woman with box braids led chants through a megaphone. Legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. Ray deserves it. Overnight, the hashtag Nuri deserves it had surged into millions of tweets. TikTok students documented their first experiences with racial profiling. Instagram flooded with art, drawings of Malcolm's speech, murals of his broken office from the break-in, poems titled "They Tried to Erase Me." Harvard could no longer ignore the movement. They invited Malcolm to address the campus himself. Standing on the steps of Widener Library, beneath gray October skies, Malcolm faced a crowd of thousands students, faculty, journalists and quiet onlookers, who remembered the Detroit kid with calloused hands and impossible dreams. I didn't ask for this, he began. I never chased glory. I never dreamed of having my name on buildings I couldn't walk into at 18. He paused. I built so students who looked like me wouldn't have to wait for approval. I built so dignity couldn't be undone by silence. Applause. Then a chant began. You are the builder. You are the builder. Later that week, the university's board met for the final vote. 5 hours of deliberation, 2 procedural deadlocks, and 1 abstention. And then it passed. The Malcolm Ray School of Equity and Enterprise. The news shattered headlines again, but this time few dared question the verdict. Malcolm didn't celebrate. Instead, he got to work. He donated $60 million to scholarships for underserved youth. First-generation college students, tech dreamers, kids with brooms in hand, and blueprints in mind. $60 million to launch technology labs in neglected communities. Harlem, Detroit, East St. Louis, Oakland, labs named not after him, but after pioneers often forgotten. Katherine Johnson, Frederick McKinley Jones, Annie Easley. At the school's opening gala, he gave no speech. He simply stood, shook hands and listened. Until a boy 10, maybe 11, walked up nervously, holding a small plastic broom pin on his jacket. His mother gently nudged him forward. Mr. Ray? The boy said, eyes wide with innocent concern. Malcolm knelt to his height, meeting him eye to eye. Did it hurt? The boy asked. When he said that to you, about being a janitor? Malcolm didn't speak immediately. He looked at the boy's face, so open, so real. The crowd watched, quiet, waiting. At the gala dinner, a young boy asks, did it hurt when he said that to you? Malcolm knelt slowly, lowering himself until he was eye to eye with the boy standing before him in his tiny tuxedo and broom pin. The room had gone quiet. Conversations at the gala froze. The weight of the boy's question lingered in the air like a held breath. Did it hurt when he said that to you? The child asked again, looking up at Malcolm with pure sincerity. Malcolm inhaled, gently resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. It didn't hurt, he said softly, because it wasn't true. The boy's head tilted. But it was me. Malcolm smiled, eyes glinting with both warmth and history. Yes, it was. But sometimes people try to measure your worth by their fear, not your future. And their fear? That's not your truth. Camera flashes popped in the background. But Malcolm wasn't performing. He was speaking to that one child, and every child like him. That image, Malcolm at eye level, with a child, speaking dignity into existence, would become iconic. It was printed on magazine covers, painted onto murals, etched into articles under the headline, "The Moment the World Stopped Shrinking, Malcolm Ray." Suddenly the infamous snubbed handshake wasn't a footnote. It became a symbol. Media outlets revisited the original incident, with new context. Think pieces titled "The Hand He Refused," "The Man He Couldn't Stop," filled the internet. Brands began reassessing internal practices, not out of PR panic, but real institutional reckoning. Inspired by Obsidian Circle's internal standards and Malcolm's public pressure, major corporations began publishing honest equity reports. Some created internal mentorship trees, others funded initiatives targeting racial and economic barriers in their industries. Tech companies in particular studied Obsidian's racial equity scorecard and internal cultural audits. A few even began hiring teams specifically to replicate Obsidian's blueprint. In response, a national media network launched a documentary titled "From Mop to Mogul." It chronicled Malcolm's rise from Detroit libraries and cleaning gigs to his billion-dollar business battles and symbolic victories. The producers begged him to participate. Malcolm declined. "This story was never about me," he said. "It's about the system we all inherited, and the silence it demanded. It's about the kids who were told to mop hallways, but never invited to design them." He refused to become a brand. He stayed behind the scenes, even as the world called him a movement. Instead, Malcolm launched something new, the Janitors Handshake Fund. It wasn't flashy. It didn't seek headlines. It simply offered early-stage funding, legal guidance, and executive mentorship to Black founders and entrepreneurs across the country. Its mission was simple but radical: build trust where systems had left voids. He traveled to schools, community centers, and co-working spaces, where hope came in scarce doses. He met teens building apps in their bedrooms, and mothers turning side hustles into startups. At every stop, he gave them his most constant line: "You matter even when they pretend you don't." That line took root. It appeared on murals in the Bronx, on pins in Atlanta, and on graduation caps from Oakland to Tulsa. Youth groups printed it on shirts. Parents whispered it to children. Entrepreneurs etched it into the footer of their pitch decks. Still, Malcolm moved quietly. He didn't chase applause, he chased access. Then one quiet night, flying home from a speaking engagement in Atlanta, Malcolm boarded a red-eye to Chicago. He wore a navy pullover, comfortable slacks, no entourage, just a book in his lap, and peace in his chest. Midway through the flight, as the beverage cart rolled past, the man seated across the aisle leaned in slightly. White, mid-50s. Soft features, eyes curious, voice cautious. "Mr. Ray?" he asked gently. Malcolm looked up. The man extended a hand. It trembled slightly, as though the moment itself was too big to steady. "I just wanted to say, it's an honor." Malcolm glanced at the hand. For a split second, the world slowed. He saw Trent's face from that gala, heard the chuckles, felt the weight of the room's silence. He remembered the sting, not from the insult, but the indifference. But this hand wasn't a gesture of ownership. It was reverence. Malcolm reached forward. Their hands met. And in that grip, something ancient cracked and reformed. On an airplane, a white man extends his hand. "Mr. Ray, it's an honor." Malcolm met the man's eyes, returning the handshake without hesitation. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't scripted. It was real. Two hands, clasped in quiet dignity, one bearing the weight of centuries, the other offering something few in Malcolm's position had ever been given without condition: respect. The man's voice was soft, slightly trembling. "William Keating, CEO of Meridian Capital. I've followed your work for years. What you've built, it's more than investment. It's moral infrastructure." Malcolm nodded. "Thank you," Keating continued. We'd like to offer you a strategic partnership, a $4 billion capital injection, full autonomy, global scope, $4 billion. The same figure once begged for in that infamous boardroom, the same figure once dangled as bait, now offered freely, as reverence, not redemption. Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't need to. Not yet. They landed. The moment passed, but Malcolm carried it with him. Back in New York, Obsidian's top floor buzzed. His advisors, analysts, and junior partners were electric. A Ford Biotter deal would triple their reach, redefine venture capital, shift the axis of power to the communities Malcolm had vowed to protect. But Malcolm held the offer next to an old photograph of his mother, standing outside the Detroit library she once cleaned and shelved books in. And beside that, he laid a folder. A profile from a small firm in Baltimore. Black-owned, female-led, unknown. They remind me of us, he said aloud. The room stilled. Clara stepped forward, scanning the Baltimore firm's numbers. Modest, raw, real. You are turning down Meridian. Malcolm nodded slowly. They see me now. But this firm? She saw herself before anyone else did. She reminds me of me. Obsidian declined the Meridian offer. Instead, they invested in the Baltimore firm, co-launching a new fund focused entirely on underserved founders, mission-aligned tech, and community-first ventures. The business world reeled. Headlines poured in. Power turned purpose. Malcolm Ray's Ford B. Others stand. He could have taken the throne. He chose a bridge. What seemed irrational turned revolutionary. Within 18 months, the partnership produced results no one expected. 47 startups funded. Tens of thousands of jobs created. Fintech platforms launched in communities with no prior infrastructure. And the world took note. Harvard rewrote portions of their ethics curriculum, naming it Ray's Principle, The Power of Opting Out. A Broadway production titled The Janitor's Handshake opened the following year. It blended spoken word, gospel, and boardroom drama. The story of dignity rising from dismissal, of betrayal turned blueprint. It sold out for 6 months straight. Malcolm never attended, but he did meet quietly with the cast backstage before their final rehearsal. You're telling more than my story, he said. You're telling everyone's who was told to mop, but never told to speak. Then something unexpected happened. Senator Denise Granger proposed new legislation, a federal holiday. Not for Malcolm, but for every black soul who was ever underestimated, for the quiet visionaries, the invisible laborers, the silenced scholars, the unseen architects of progress. Pathmakers Day, a celebration of those who didn't just survive discrimination, but carved paths through it. The bill passed. Malcolm stood at the back of the Senate chamber during the vote. He didn't speak, didn't stand for applause. But when the gavel struck wood, Clara turned to him. You did it. Malcolm shook his head. We did. Then, after a long pause, he added, voice low. They thought I was cleaning floors. She looked at him, tears rising. But I was clearing paths. The janitor wasn't the one cleaning floors. He was clearing paths. No one should have to wear silence to be seen. If Malcolm's story moved you, if you've ever felt the sting of being overlooked, or watched someone be dismissed for who they are, not what they bring, then don't scroll past. Type yes if you believe respect should never come with conditions. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.